So this directly relates to Rosh Hashanah. If you realize that every human being is created in God Almighty's divine image, and that but for the fusion of his thinking, that he is thinking that he's being deprived, he is being agitated, he would see that him created in God Almighty's divine image. He would see in the other person that that person is created in God Almighty's divine image. When you know that a person is created in God Almighty's divine image, you cannot possibly go take action to kill them, to murder them. You can't take something that doesn't belong to you with your energy or with theft, or these become impossibilities, because what you see is that they are created in God Almighty's divine image. So our job is, the job of the Jew who's carrying the message in the world, is to be able, no matter what happens, to be able to see that divine in the other person, and to show an example how we can see that even the person who's coming to kill us, God forbid, to be able to see that. Mordechai was able to see the divine in Haman. He didn't go around saying that Haman is bad-mouthing Haman. He realized that the Haman only had an opening because the Jews were in a place of despair in the first place. So what we need to do is we need to recognize that what is happening is Amalek is getting themselves, they're off track, and they're getting other people to lose connection with reality. And then they plant in a person's mind, like the anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish stuff that goes on in the quote unquote white supremacist groups and the Arab groups. Also, these are not people just woke up in the morning and they're looking out. I'm looking here at a beautiful view of a river, and the Rose of Sharon tree in the bush in the middle. No one wakes up with a hostility towards other human beings unless it's something that's being, first of all, they have to be uncoupled from their creator. They have to then be uncoupled from their own soul, and then told that their misery is because so-and-so is doing it, whether it's the Protestants, or it's the crown, or it's the Jews, or it's the Arabs, or it's because of the blacks or the whites, whatever it is. This is the concept of the War of National Liberation. The War of National Liberation exploits differences that are no longer really, the traditional hostilities between groups of people have basically all dissipated around the world. It's all dissipated. But to create the destruction that's necessary to be able to bring in government tyranny, they first bring in the acts of terror to incite the people into losing hope. So people lose hope. First of all, the first hope they lose is they write off a group of humanity as beyond redemption. As soon as you believe that any human being is beyond redemption, beyond being able to live according to the fact that he's created in God Almighty's divine image, you have just checked something in the victory column for Amalek. Our job is to see that even Amalek is also created in the Eibishter's divine image. In fact, we see that by Haman, his grandchildren, some of them even became Yidden. They became converted to become Jews, and it says that they were learning in Bnei Brak. That's what it says in the Talmud. This is something that every human being is possible of. Even the Roman emperors that became converts. So people who were immersed in the most insanely wicked things could actually turn around. How's that possible? Because they are inherently good. It's a Christian idea that man is born and man is inherently bad. We cannot adopt that idea. When we start saying that is a so-and-so and he is like that, we have bought into a lie. And that's the first part, Eliyahu. We have to ourselves, as the communicators of the truth, and we have to first stay connected to the truth. We have to be working every day to see, and every moment to see that this person is really who he really is, that he's created in God Almighty's divine image. The Rebbe says something really incredibly mind-blowing and heart-opening. He says that our greatest opponents are going to become our greatest advocates. Because when they see that we see in them that they are nothing but a creation in the divine image, that will touch them, and they will see that we've seen something that no one else has seen in them. They will see their own reality in our eyes, the way we look at them, even while they're standing and cursing at us and waving their flags and the Nazi flags and the different flags, and they're sitting there making their missiles and whatever else they're doing. And this, by the way, applies to the people in the let's say the Israeli government that are actually funding all these terrorists and giving them territory and giving them intelligence information and giving them land and giving them access and all this kind of stuff. Those people also need to be reached. The only way to reach them is by seeing who they really are, because they know that, and they're just trying to outrun themselves because of their own fear. So if you actually think about it, everyone knows the saying of the Baal Shem Tov that when he had the Aliyah in the Shama and he went to ask Melech Mashiach, when is Mashiach going to come? So it's a famous, when your well springs are going to be spread out. So the Rebbe says what that actually means is not limited to the general idea we have of that, is that the water from the well springs of the Baal Shem Tov will, touch every person in the world, and every person is going to have a little bit of that water, or that wetness, the mayanos from the water. The Rebbe says no, it's much deeper than that. Chutza means that every human being is going to be revealed as an unlimited wellspring of divine wisdom. That's what it means. Your well springs will spread out. The well springs of the Baal Shem Tov is to bring out that every human being is a wellspring. And that includes Ahmed and Ramallah, no matter what he did last night, no matter what he's planning for today. So as people reporting, so as the reporters, now to the question about the reporters, the first thing is that it's necessary to always show God's hand in what's happening. That you cannot just be a different information source, a more reliable information source, because people are disconnected in general from God. The Rebbe said to these reporters, report on how the hand of God is in this. If it's an earthquake, the earthquake, it's so fascinating. The latest craze is to blame all the things in the world, whether the environmentalists or the the people who are have alternative theories, saying, oh, it's all man-made, either because there's too many human beings affecting the environment. The other people are saying it's caused by lasers and HARP and radio waves and all this kind of stuff. Everyone's ignoring God. The Alter Rebbe says in the Siddur in Daf, he writes that anyone who thinks that the temperature change in the world in the winter is because the angle of the world changes from the sun by a certain number of degrees that's such an absurd idea. It's so absurd. And you can see that there's days in winter where it's very warm, days in the summer when it's cold. It's an absurd idea. The weather of everyone's weather is controlled individually, that there's a cloud passing right now and a little wind gets stirred up and it's a little chilly there and it's warm there, and the winds, that's all by divine providence to exactitude. That's what the Torah teaches us. So coming and trying to blame or claim that everything is man-made now. I had a guy telling me that all the clouds, I met him yesterday, he's telling me all the clouds, you see all these clouds, none of them are natural. They're all from spraying in the air. I was like, first of all, don't you realize that you are being trained to ignore that there's a God in the world? Every single cloud was created by a man-made cloud. Like, what kind of arrogance is this? It's like people have fallen into this trap of believing that everything is controlled by man. They love that. They love that. They don't care if you know about their plans, as long as you think that the men are the most powerful, and they forget about God. So that's number one. The other thing is, as a reporter and someone who wants to do investigative journalism, you have an obligation to show people that this terrorist who just, God forbid, did something, he is not a lone wolf. There's no such thing as lone wolf terrorists. That's a deception by the intelligence services to confuse the people and make them more scared, and then excuse why they don't actually wolf terrorists. The terrorists look how to cover their trade hostility. They can identify the people who are attracted to that, and then prompt them direct to take action and act on agitation. It's not a guy will up in the morning and had a lone desire to be alone. It's because every one of those things is every one of those times, and it's time. And not only is it time, they all cycle because it's time to produce a result. The result is more, let's say in the case by the dinner. Every time you see, if you go to Mumbai, they had, think about it, a bunch of communist terrorists are coming to Mumbai. Everyone focused on the attack on the Chabad house. Now, why they attacked the Chabad house, what was their real mission? The real mission, most of the terrorist attacks were actually directed at shifting the balance of the elections. It was an election, I think, 2 weeks later, and the election outcomes was changed because of the terrorist attack. So why did they add the Chabad house, which has no significance to the general Indian population, in this attack? Very simply, there was a massive change in the attitude of shluchim and a provoked response and a change in the power structure in Chabad because of that attack. And we don't even know all the effects behind the scenes. So the job of the reporter is to make sure not to repeat the propaganda message that is being presented with the terrorist attack, and to point out what is being done to prime the population. If you go back to 9/11, we just had 9/11 yesterday. In 2001, in the summer of 2001, the New York Times ran a series of articles on bin Laden and Al-Qaeda on the front page of the New York Times. Why? Because the agenda was to bring Al-Qaeda into the front of people's awareness. So now the guys in the New York Times had no idea that 9/11 was going to happen. And they just knew that there was all of a sudden a directive to write about bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. So this was prompting the people. How is it that within a few minutes of the attacks that they said it's Al-Qaeda? Well, this was a household name in America because because it had been primed for them. So if you're a reporter and you're looking at this, you don't want to jump on the bandwagon that it was Al-Qaeda. You're like, well, who really did this? Now, I'm not talking about the real people, who really did 9/11. No one talks about it, by the way. Everyone's the CIA, the Israelis, all these kind of distractions. It's, the Soviets are the only ones who have the ability to train and create such a thing. The Saudis didn't do it either. These guys were not religious Saudis coming out of some real Muslim demonic assembly. This is something that the PLO I want to make one last distinction for Mordechai's question, and is that this is not, what the leftists will say is they'll try to say, oh, we'll ignore the terrorists and just love everybody. And Marxism always steals something that's true and then twists it. We are not ignoring the terrorism, but we're exposing what the real purpose of it is. Terrorism is to create a result, and the target of the terrorism, not the people who died. No dead terrorist victim was the target of the terrorism. The victim, the real victim, and the real target of the terrorism is you and me and all the people that are still alive. And that's why terrorism can be so effective when it has a zero effect on the population. I mean, statistically speaking, we know that one life is like the whole world. But I'm saying, statistically speaking, you have 6 million people, you move 600 of them, God forbid, or 6,000 of them. It's not statistically significant, and it doesn't affect the military preparedness. It doesn't affect the security of the country. Why is terrorism then so effective? Because it's designed to affect the minds of the survivors, of the people who are reading the news. So the news is the critical amplifier of the effect of the terrorism. If the news would not report on the terrorist attacks, the terrorist attacks would have very little effect. I mean, now you have WhatsApp and people have their own, ways of communicating. But in the front page pictures of the hijacked airplanes was the goal. The first tactical goal was to get it on the front page of the newspaper. Then you get the people to surrender to that fear. So how does the newspaper break that? Then you write about it openly. We are being asked to report about this event in order to scare you about the threat that to scare you into believing that there's 600 million hostile Arabs in the Middle East. Instead, we're not going to report about that. We're going to report about how a very small number of communist Jews and non-Jews are cooperating and get together to create a scissors effect on you that crush the Jewish people and the Arabs in the middle, and get people to surrender to a situation that will be a terrorist government and not just a terrorist group. Because don't forget what they succeeded in doing. They succeeded through their terrorism in getting the Jewish people to withdraw from the West Bank and Gaza, to build a wall around the Jewish people to prevent the Jewish people from influencing and expanding into those territories, then turned over all those people to the rulership of a terror regime. So if you can bring that to the front in the articles that expose these groups and who they really are, and there's people, you could research them and show how they're related, and just expose what the reality is. So that's my suggestion.